Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This podcast is sponsored by McConnell Music Therapy Services, Inc., where they believe in the power of music to transform people and communities. Based in Northern California, their board-certified music therapists support people of all ages and abilities within hospitals, schools, corporations, and communities using music experience to connect, express, and de-stress. Visit them at mcconnellmts.com or their Facebook page, McConnell Music Therapy. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is also sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It is so great to be here with you. I'm so glad you're here. Listen, I am really excited today because I have a very special interview. This conversation was 10 years in the making with composer Wayne Jones. Don't worry, I'll reveal what I mean by that in the interview. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Wayne. Wayne Jones is a television composer, a multi-instrumentalist, an engineer, and an inventor who's best known for his underscore and songs for television shows like White Collar and Graceland, The Flash, The Resident, Criminal Minds, and House MD, and Parenthood, and films that include That Thing You Do and Tuesdays with Morrie. As a pianist and a keyboardist, Wayne has performed with numerous touring jazz and classical artists. He's recorded and performed concert music with the LA Phil and the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, and he's headed his own jazz trio in Tokyo and LA. His works for advertising include like music for the NFL, Viasat, Playtex, Campbell Soup, Pfizer, Lever, and the 2008 Obama presidential campaign. However, he's known to me for his work as a songwriter, instrumentalist, and producer of numerous albums for Lifescapes music. So please enjoy this very special and intimate conversation about how important Wayne's albums for Lifescapes were for my family to relieve our stress in one of the most challenging chapters of our life. So sit back, relax, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, Wayne, it is so great to have you on the pod. Thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely. It's an honor, and I'm so excited to finally meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
It's literally, so audience members, it's been 10 years since I was first, maybe 11 technically. No, I think it was the summer of 2010 was when I was introduced to your music for the first time, and it was massively pivotal in my life. Our stories intertwine really interestingly, because I want to know how, so there's this music company called Lifescapes, right, that produces what we might call relaxation music, we might call music for wellness, new age music, like there's some different umbrellas that we'll throw out. I discovered the kiosk at Target.
Right.
There was a Lifescapes. Okay, people, 10 years back, think back in Target, up the main aisle, halfway up on the right, just after the greeting cards, before you get to the kids' toys, there was a kiosk. Remember CDs, everybody? Remember? Think back. And they had all this great, chill, instrumental, mostly instrumental music. And I, as a music therapy student, was like really into using music for purposes other than entertainment or education, and as this clinical tool for resetting and relaxing people. And so I discovered the kiosk, and so I start buying CDs on my own. And then my daughter ends up at the University of Minnesota Amplatz Children's Hospital in Minneapolis for a bone marrow transplant, because it was literally the only hospital in the country that could treat her disease, just super rare disease. She's like in this clinical trial. And like Wayne, just the craziest chain of events. A childhood friend from my tiny town in Connecticut moves to Minneapolis and ends up a professor at U of M, and he's a doctor, and we reconnect over Facebook, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're coming here?" Yeah. Well, great. We'll throw a like barbecue when you get here. Like, we'll reconnect. Super.
Right. Yeah.
So we go over to Logan's house. Haven't seen Logan since I'm 12. Now I'm like 30 something, and then like 37, hi Logan. No memory, no memory. Here's Logan, grown up, middle-aged, lives in, St. Anthony. And
You have those
oh, and
baseball
here's
cards I lent you.
right, totally just like bizarre, here we are reconnected. And he's like, oh, and here's my friend Mark. Hi, Mark. And his name's Mark Flora, and he's a musician and he's a producer.
Right. Mark Flora.
And so as we're chatting, we're like, blah, 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 blah. And Mark, for those of you, you should go look up the Holy Rockarollas.
Yes.
His band is a wonderful band. He is a wonderful human. His wife is a wonderful human. His family is amazing. And so Mark and I start chatting, and as musicians, we're just like, oh, musician. It's like a speed dating. So chat. And then he comes somehow, Lifescapes comes up. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, I produce those records. I'm like, stop it. I'm your biggest fan, which is great because this is the Target kiosk. We're not talking about a platinum selling record, right? We're talking like, this is not your typical conversation between a fan and a producer. So it's like, of that, like, you even know what I do? And I was like, not only do I know what I do, I have this record, I have this record, I have this record. And the two of us, it's like bromance immediately. So the next time I see him, he comes with a shopping bag. Every single CD in the catalog. Here, brother, you need these right now more than I do because you're trying to manage your sanity and your daughter's well-being. And so wonderful gift. And so your name kept coming up on all of these CDs. And then what I want to say is your wife's name, because Amy Hayashi Jones, did I pronounce that correctly?
Exactly. Yes.
Good so job. I'm like 2 to 2 because I'm a pretty smart guy. I put 2 and 2 together. I think these two are a pair. And I am listening to a ton of their music. And so how did you end up crossing paths with Lifescapes? Tell me that story.
Okay. So my friend Dirk, you fast forward and Dirk ends up traveling and doing a lot of amazing things in his life. And he ends up moving to Minneapolis and hooks up with Joel Sales and Jimmy England's, two amazing musicians, and formed a trio called Hindu Rodeo, which I think was really popular in Minneapolis back in the day.
What a great name.
Still is. Yeah, isn't it a great name? Great music, and Joel's an amazing songwriter and multi-instrumentalist. And it turns out he was tapped to be the executive producer for Lifescapes when Compass Records started producing these records for Target, right? And they had basically, as businesses work, you have the situation where Target being the, let's say, what's the analogy? They're the airline company, and they said, okay, we got to tell everybody that we've got all these flights that are going all over the country and the world, right? And then they've got to go, oh my God, where are we going to get all the planes and organize all this, right? So I got a call from Dirk, and he said, look, my friend Joel is executive producing this series of recordings, and would you and Amy, like, first of all, can Amy record 4 classical piano albums? I think we had 6 weeks to do this. And when I say we, she, so they wanted a Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, and forget the fourth one, Debussy album. And we were like, so you do what a musician does, and you say yes first, just like Target did, and just like Lifescapes did, right? Everybody just says yes first. Again, you figure it out, right? But it was an amazing opportunity because, and Amy's an amazing pianist, so she was up for it. But it was a challenge because we were just getting into really setting up we started our home studio thing. We had just, moved to a new place in Highland Park and set up a studio. And it was so funny because we were on this alley, the house was attached from the studio, which was a converted garage, as you do. And there was an alley running there. So, it would be this constant thing of like a truck would go by and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Amy, we got to stop. Can you do that section again? And we're not talking about like, you know what I mean? It's not nothing against cowboy chords, but it's like you're in the middle of Debussy's Debussy Nocturne or something, and it's like, oh my God, I feel so bad for it, Then we ran into this, so we said, oh, okay, maybe what we should do is record, like literally record in the middle of the night.
Right.
So there won't be. So we started doing that. Then we ran into this other problem where the birds would start chirping, or owl would start cooing or whatever at 4:30 in the morning. And it was just crazy. Anyway, so that's sort of a tangent, but just give you a little peek into there. That worked out great. She's amazing. The recordings turned out great.
She did 4 classical records in 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was 6 weeks or less than 6 weeks. We definitely recorded one a week.
That's an insane
when we did. So we either did the prep for 2 weeks and then recorded 4 in a row, or it was like 5 weeks and we did the same thing. It was
unbelievable.
She was a gymnast when she was young too, so she's got sort of that. I think being a cross between Japanese gymnast and and an amazing musician, she was able to pull this whole thing.
Wow.
She's got like the fortitude and the talent.
There you go.
But then Dirk knew I composed, and they also needed some original music and some other produced music, and he said, "Hey, can you record a couple of albums of original music?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So. Same thing. That sort of launched off the whole thing, and just really enjoyed we knew, or I felt like we knew, what an incredible opportunity it was to try to learn our craft, give something, create something. The company was unbelievable. Both Target and Lifescapes were amazing because, as you said, there were a lot of the music that we produced, and we produced over 60 albums for them over the years. So. That was a long time. It was like, I think it was 17 years that we ended up working for them, which was an amazingly long run. We were very blessed and still are to be given that opportunity to experience. And, but it was, it was relaxation music and meditation music and heart-centered sort of spiritual music, but also I got to do create jazz albums for them. A lot of Latin music, actually. So, which was amazing because we have such a rich Latin music, cohort in Los Angeles. And
totally,
again, just so lucky and blessed to be working with Kevin Ricard and all these amazing musicians, all these guys that ended up recording for us. And and speaking of musicians, one of the other things that was really important to me, just as a side note, was, look, the budgets weren't great by any standard. It was amazing because we got to have such longevity with them, and they were very generous, But one of the things that was a very conscious decision on our part at the very beginning was to try to pay the musicians, but try to use as many live musicians as we could, first of all, because my
nice.
goal was, when I listen to this music in 20 years, and here we are, I want to hear as little, I want to cringe as little as possible at the production and things like that. And yes, we're going to make less money, now doing this by hiring live musicians, and also hiring a really great engineer. That was another, I think, a very smart choice on our part. Because my simple theory was, if we do a great job, I would rather have a longer gig than to get paid the most money I can for one gig. I just feel lucky to be working regularly as a musician. It was an honor for that many years. So that was sort of our ethos and our philosophy about working on those recordings. And
that's really great. That's definitely a kismet meant to be thing, because those records aren't, the whole premise of it isn't we're trying to cash in on $1 million albums and concerts and things like that. So that same, like you said, ethos, it went all the way down through the two of you down into all the way down to quality engineers and live musicians, like you said, because keyboards,
Yeah.
There's a Rocky IV album is a formative track for me as a teenager.
Right.
And I don't remember Vince's last name. It escapes me right now, and I'm kicking myself. The composer. But there were two tracks on it where Rocky is training and when Rocky fights Drago. And they're called like Training Montage and War. And I can tell you this because they were the soundtrack of me making my middle school basketball team. I was terrible at basketball, but I was determined to make this team. And that cassette played over and over and over again. But I went back, because now I have Apple Music. I went back and I downloaded it to work out to. And boy, is it cringeworthy. Just the
Right.
audio quality, because it's very clearly done with a synth. It's his orchestral parts. He scored it for orchestra, but then he recorded it with MIDI, and
Right.
it's a keyboard. And I couldn't tell then, but I can tell now.
Yeah.
And it lost its power.
There's something, yeah, exactly. That's a beautiful way to put it. It lost its hour. And I'll go on the record, especially because, I mean, for one thing, I'm a keyboardist. That's what I did for session work, and that's what I use this equipment and this gear
Yeah.
constantly in TV scoring and everything else, music that I produced for the last 25 years. And so it's not that I'm not a fan of electronic music at all. I mean, like Nine Inch Nails, oh my God, But the difference is, for me, is like you listen to Garbage or Nine Inch Nails or whatever it is, or Radio. Okay, so Radiohead is like pretty much my touchstone, like my favorite rock. Between The Who, they're very different groups. The Who and Radiohead are my favorite rock groups of all
Outstanding.
time, right? And sort of Radiohead is just kind of my favorite, almost my favorite music of all time. So they use electronic and processed music in a way that will forever be musical. So that's just be clear about my position about that. It's just like what you were pointing to. When someone's obviously trying to emulate an acoustic sound and making the choice not to have that, that's where it's problematic for me sonically.
Yes.
Everything, any sound can work as a musical, expression, right? Absolutely anything.
Absolutely.
It's just the intention behind it, right?
Nailed it. That was the word that was just sitting on my tongue. It's all about the intention, right? And if you're making a cheap photocopy of the real thing, it's sooner or later you're going to get found out. And I think that's what happens when you go that route. But that's really great. As I started recording this podcast, and with the intention of recording these. So the quick short story behind this is when lockdown happened, I pressed play on Facebook Live in my garage converted studio, and I did 40 Facebook Lives in 40 days of acoustic guitar, either 612 steel or classical guitar with a loop pedal, and just built meditative loops, fun loops. Sometimes and the title of the Facebook Lives was just Something to Comfort You.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it was just just a gift, and it was good for me, but it was also really like, how can I show up right now? And I can show up. I was a musician first, so I can show up with music. And then I wanted to record it. And luckily my iPhone, just like, bless the powers that be, the Facebook Lives with the little speaker I had in my garage with the iPhone, it would just, all the levels just happened to sound really pretty good for pulling off a Facebook Live. And I would constantly have people asking me what classical guitar I play. They're like, that guitar. And it was that guitar. And it was like the tone of that guitar. They were so impressed with the sound of the music. And then when I came into the studio, I realized there's a difference between the music and the sound of the music, right? And that was like, so now I have to have my eye on two things. The score itself and what's happening musically in musical information, the emotional information, but then what's happening sonically. Absolutely. And how do I match the sound so that the sound matches the score? And that's like, this is Nerdville 101 for you and me to have this conversation. But
Right.
for, I'm sharing this is kind of like going behind the scenes, like for the listeners to understand that when we are composing and recording music, one of the very important pieces of the magic, why what's happening in your head, which came through your ears, is moving you so much, is this conversation about the sound of the music. And one
Oh,
of the things about the Lifescape records where they sounded impeccable, and I would buy other relaxation CDs at the same time, and they had like, the sound was just cheap, it was cheesy, it was just, the sound wasn't there. And so
oh, yes.
every bit of the sound of the records calmed my nervous system as the musical information itself.
It's you. You are hitting on something that's very important, and I think that for your listeners, it's funny because yes, it's you can think of it as Nerdville, and we're talking about what will be esoteric points for non engineers and musicians, but it's not something that's missed on the ears of any listener of any level of experience, because it just points to multimodal experience and how our senses work together to deliver an experience to someone through the medium of sound, right?
Mm.
um, it's interesting because I teach. I'm a lecturer, part-time lecturer at USC, and in a class called the Audio and Sound Toolkit, and teach sound design. And one of the examples I use for exactly what you're talking about, I'll just try to find new music. And there's this amazing song by Billie Eilish called I'll probably mess up the title, but I had a dream, I got everything I wanted, right? That song, great song. Like
Oh,
simple, just a beautifully written song, great delivery. But the thing about it is, if you listen to that song and you listen where she is on the microphone
mm.
and the intimacy that she's getting, it's so much of the expression and the evocativeness of the message, the storytelling that's coming through the music has to do with the way her voice is recorded. It's
Yes.
You need all those things together. You need a great song, you need a great artist, people recording it well and everything. It's also, if you had somebody else singing it, and even her, if you had her singing it a foot away from the microphone instead of one, like 3 centimeters from the microphone,
Yes.
very different experience,
Very
So
different.
sound is, and just going back to your point about the recordings, the Lifescapes recordings, that is one of the, almost equally to the music. I mean, I'm proud of the music because we really put a lot of care and work into it and thought into it and love. Um, but it was always so important, the sonic delivery and the transfer of that through that medium, because I had the same experience because I was listening to other music at the time and saying, what do I like about their music? What do I not like? I'm about to go on the court with this. What can I learn before I take the ball in my hands, right? And and that was one of the things that just kind of blew me away, and I was baffled by is when people were produced. Don't want to get down on people, so I can't even name names, but you listen to some of this music, and yes, it could be relaxing music aside from the fact that the tones were strident and things like that, or yeah, or there was a lot of hiss or whatever it was. The entire experience is very important, right?
Yeah,
Like cooking or anything else, it's like anytime you enjoy an experience, it's good to think about multiple levels of the experience, not just
absolutely.
not just the foreground. Background is very important too.
Yeah. So thank you for all of that attention to detail back then, because it really mattered. It was,
Thank you.
yeah,
for
yeah.
listening.
And so this is a funny conversation because you're getting to hear back, right? You're getting this, hey, what I loved about it,
Um,
So I'm curious, there's writing music and performing music for entertainment.
mhm,
There's writing and performing and through for education, kind
right,
of our main contexts of how we interact with music in our modern culture. Those are like the big two.
right.
But this world that I live in music therapy, and the therapeutic purpose of music is everybody reaches for music at some point, think that's what a playlist is. It's what a mixtape was, or a blank CD. We would prescribe ourselves some music to help us execute A, B, or C, right?
Right.
We would put on a certain record when we felt bad and we wanted to really feel those feelings. The blues, it's an entire genre dedicated to the, expression and emoting of pain
Yeah.
and suffering, and like, let's not pretend we're not feeling this way. And that's why we all resonate with sad songs. And I don't think Adele would have a career without the heartbreak she went through.
Yeah.
It was the
Exactly.
muse that everybody could relate to, because if you've had a broken heart, you feel that connection inside of the music, right?
Right.
And so there's this deep, meaningful human interaction. And I've shared with you, so with my daughter in the bone marrow transplant, what we did was we created playlists, relaxation playlists for her hospital room, because we knew that having slow tempo instrumental music on would slow down her nervous system, our nervous system, but the staff as well.
Oh, wow.
She
Yeah.
had a very complex case. A lot of standards of care were contraindicated. So, like, if a any number of physical therapists, occupational therapist, respiratory therapist, nurse, if they all came in and did something what they would typically do with another patient, they might injure her. So it was really important to get the staff out of like autopilot
Yeah.
and like present, like, whoa.
Right.
And so we always had our Lifescapes playlists playing in the room to kind of create this environment of calm and peace and gentleness for everybody that's involved in this very highly stressful situation.
Right.
And then when she passed away, for her memorial, I knew that I wanted the first track off of Quiet Night played, and I wanted Claire de Lune played. And I just knew those were like the soundtrack, the most peaceful, beautiful expressions of music that could accompany this beautiful expression of humanity, which was my daughter's life. And so I reached out to you and I was like, hey man, thanks Facebook for making you findable. Here's a really intense story, yada, yada, yada. I have the piano, like the dean of, what do they call it? Accompanying arts. I can't remember what her title is at Chapman University, Dr. Louise Thomas. She's willing to play at Bella's memorial. She's going to play Claire de Lune, but I would love her to play this first track. And you were so great. You're like, I don't think we have a score for that. Like, we like just wrote it. Like, what we just like, it was like, might have been improvised. Like, there might be a sketchbook somewhere,
Oh,
right?
sorry. Yes.
It was so great. No, because I'm with you. I have a piece of paper in the across the room right now that's totally meaningless to anybody else but me. But it's the arrangement of the last track called Keep Moving. And it only makes sense to me. Like, if you
Yes.
said, hey, can I get the arrangement? I'd be like, here, I'll take a picture and good luck,
They're hieroglyphics. Right.
totally hieroglyphics. Right. But you scored it for us and you sent it to me, like, no fee, nothing, like on a tight time frame. And it was played live. And I was really curious, like, if you had ever had like that track even perform, like a lot of the Lifescape stuff. Did you, the way we were doing it, the context wasn't like you were going out on touring in support of these. So I'm curious, like, a lot of it you probably never actually played live after you recorded it.
It's interesting. Okay, first of all, I have to say I can't think. I mean, it's very emotional for me to hear the story again, even though I'm familiar with it. But it's like, it's emotional because when you create something, like as you've said, you never know what the universe is going to do with this baby that you make. This different kind of creation.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's the word is honored, or I just feel like it's not even honored. So, because that puts it on me, isn't it? That's using the capital I. I would just say it feels like there is maybe some purpose for what I do that makes sense if something I've been involved with gets used in this context. So that's that's more than I could hope for, you know? So there's that. But as far as, you know, yeah, it's, or no, rather, have I heard my music performed live in other contexts? I certainly, there's some music, some of it I certainly would like to. And it's interesting because without getting too technical for your listeners either, I think the easiest way to put it is there are two types of music that I wrote for Lifescapes, and I think there's one type of music that can be recreated in a sense, and the piano pieces from Quiet Night are one example of that. I actually did, uh, wrote a lot of Latin music that I think I told you about. That's like salsa music that I had these scores for, and I could, and that would be super fun to get a group together and play that, hear that played at some point. But there's that sort of music that's conventionally or can be conventionally notated in a way in the future, right? And performed in the future. But what happens with the other part of the production, like the relaxation and yoga music and things like that, the production is as much a part of the composition as the composition itself.
Wow.
So it really doesn't lend itself to being recreated in that sense, if that is understandable. Because I was as much or more concerned with doing exactly what you were talking about, which is trying to find, first of all, that what a beautiful description of what you were doing by trying to calibrate all the team, all the players involved in your child's health, right? And what a beautiful example of what I think is the way to treat most and improve the experience for most people's lives by looking at more holistically like that. I just think that that's a beautiful template for most situations where you want to improve something.
Thank you.
And it does feel like you can calibrate people that way because we're talking about vibration and frequency and pitch, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you listen, I think it was Tesla that said if you wanted to unlock the secrets of the universe, look at frequency, vibration, energy.
Brilliant.
Something like that. And it's true because it does, music has this ability to actually create physiological changes by bringing us all in sync, you know? Yeah, so there's that sort of music that I think they're more of one-offs. And that's why whenever I have an opportunity to do that, I'd rather recreate evoke that sort of music again rather than try to do an arrangement of any of those particular songs. Can I just add something too that is something struck me when you were talking about, and I'm just using the word calibration, that may not be accurate, but when you were talking about the contraindications, and being careful about that and trying to calibrate everyone and how people respond to, if you empathize, if you've had struggles or tragedies in your life, or just simple, not so simple, teenage heartbreaks. They're very real,
Yes.
But it's interesting because it made me think of something as you were describing this experience with your team and your family, that there's this concept in physics with light and sound, called cancellation, right? Phase cancellation.
Yes.
Which, without getting too technical, is how noise canceling earbuds work and headphones. And what you do is you feed an input that's the same as the output, and you can cancel those frequencies, right? And as you were describing this, I was thinking maybe that's what's working with music when you listen to mournful music or sad music, is if you have that emotion, maybe that's what it's doing, and that's the catharsis that you feel, and that's the effect that it's sort of canceling that out and healing you that in some sort of physical way,
Love it.
I don't know, that probably doesn't make scientific sense, but it feels like an analogy that I could work with.
Yeah, no, that's great because the way I try to translate it for people is around connection. So as mammals, we're social animals, and our nervous system is like the default is to connect with other humans. So we work in groups, we survive in groups. That's how we dominated the natural world, was through the organization of groups. So we are always in relationship, and being human is like a shared experience. And emotion is just energy and motion in the body. And our job is, how do we express, which just means get it out. How do we squeeze it out? How do we neutralize it? How do we express that emotion? And music has this unique ability for us to feel connected in that emotion.
Right.
And in that connection of that emotion, the expression occurs. And no words are necessary. Like, I don't need to talk. It's, I'd listen, right? So Adele talks and I listen, and what my heart and my soul say, yes, that right there, that's me too. And in that me too, that's that cancellation.
It never becomes less magical, right? Isn't it?
I feel the same exact way.
It's like, for so many things that have diminishing returns in this universe, music is not one of them. Music always delivers, to me at least. And
so great.
Just to do a little my own version of an old man rant.
Right.
I've never been more excited about music than I am today. There's so much great music, and if you're not hearing it, you're either clogging your ears or just not looking for it. Because there is so much. I mean, pick a genre.
Yes.
And if you want to put in, and if you really want to put any energy into trying to find something that it can appeal to you, I guarantee you can find it if you put a little effort into it. And
absolutely.
Not very much. If you have Spotify or Apple Music, they're doing most of the heavy lifting for you.
Right. They'll help you.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know. I'm high on music. Big time.
I'm high on music too. Yeah. Well said. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music in Recovery Self-Care Guide for healthcare professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.